I presented one sentence over 3 hours, right? And talked to them about the 21 things that they should do or whatever.
We channel had that line, right? We are like this only.
Yes, that's what we came up
which I think Ramad Bijapurkar then used it
without royalties
on a very successful book. Yeah, but it's a nice line.
Yeah.
But I don't think you registered that line.
It's okay. I mean, there's so much that was stolen from us. Who cares? So, anyway, eventually we started an online site without their permission, which actually Goldman Sachs came and valued at some ridiculous amount of money. At which point, News Corp woke up and said, we are acquiring Channel V, right? So,
all of you exited.
Yeah. So, I had no desire to work for, even though this man was very cordial, this man called Peter Mukherjee.
You know Peter very well?
Of course, yeah. He was the guy we sold the channel to. So, and also knew him from Hong Kong.
All of us do, yeah.
Yeah. And so that entire gang. So basically, then I liked being back in India. So I started investing in startups. Invested in a company called Geodesic, which actually I took public in 2003. Made again a potload of money. So I kind of figured this was really interesting. In my own personal journey, I started off.
So it was what? After V channel, was a U-turn, right? It was actually a U-channel because you turned around.
Yeah, my life is a U-turn channel, right? So basically what I'd learned in the US, let me put it this way. When I left home and tried to start a business and failed, and then landed up in advertising, I kind of, in the background that I come from, Ambi, nobody in my family ever in living history has ever been an entrepreneur. We're all good Brahmin boys.
Tambrams either become doctor, engineer, or maybe an IAS officer.
Or they end up working for somebody. Very good managers.
Good number two.
So we were talking about Tata Motors. So my theory is that, after Rusi Modi kind of had this major rebellion against the Tatas and they quelled the rebellion, they figured that we have to basically, lock down our businesses and make sure nobody ever can take the company away from us. So every Tata company has ever since been run by Tambram. So TCS is Tambram, Tata Steel is Tambram.
TCS is Tambram, but
seriously,
Tata Steel Ravikant is not a Tambram at all.
No, what's the guy? Narendran is Tambram, who runs it right now. Tata Telecom is Tambram. So the entire Ratan Tata theory is put a Tambram in charge of a company. You will get somebody who will never rebel, never fight. He will work very hard, take little money, make a lot of money from you.
That's your theory, but I don't know whether he thought it that way.
Well, it can't be coincidence. There is such a tiny minority of people, and we run every Tata company, right? So it's
an interesting theory. You should.
It's a theory, obviously. It may be choice, but who knows? And of course, the diversity council.
So when did you set up Pinstorm? Was it?
So I'll just come to that. So one of the things I did, I was saying that I tried to be an entrepreneur and failed because I didn't know. Nobody could teach me. None of the colleges could teach me. In the US, I kind of learned this entire thing osmosis. Like friends would say, hey, come solve this marketing problem. You know all this digital stuff. And I liked what they were. They say, here, take some money. So I suddenly figured that, one of the biggest problems in advertising was, this too, right? I come up with a great idea. You're the client. Half my time is coming up with the idea and half the time is trying to figure out how to con you into buying the idea. Right? Because
sometimes it's more than half the time.
Okay. So. Yeah, absolutely. And because you don't trust me, because I'm out here to make money. I'm like, well, this guy is trying to screw me.
So nowadays they also think you're out here to win an award. So that's a new problem.
Yeah. So this actually short-circuited the entire thing. I wanted to be a good marketing guy. So I figured the best way was to give the client money and say, with my money, here's the idea. At which point the client would say, man, actually he's aligned with us.
But do you know, if you read history of some of the great agencies, like, the origin of FCB was Lord and Thomas. The founder of Lord and Thomas, Albert Lasker, used to invest in his client's business. He owned, I think, a large part of Colgate-Palmolive. He owned a large part of the Pepsodent was a brand which he owned, which he then later sold.
That's cool.
So he used to own companies.
You're depressing me because I thought I was one of the first guys to do it, to invest in my clients.
125 years ago, someone did it.
So more power to him. I figured that was the only way to get them to buy my ideas, to say, look, I'm not scamming you. you have my money, because if this fails, I will lose my money. And that turned out suddenly to be a good thing. Suddenly, client was not sitting on the opposite side of the table. He was sitting beside me and saying, okay, what should we do? That I loved. So my investments in companies started in '99, basically because I kind of figured in some ways it made my job easier. I could do marketing. I could do advertising. I could do marketing counsel by actually saying, well, I'm aligned with you.
So your VC fund.
So my first fund was called Passion Fund. I set it up in '98, '99. And I invested in Geodesic, Taliho, Webdunia.
Webdunia was okay. It used to be our client,
Yeah. So a bunch of these guys.
What's his name? Indore based, right?
Chajlani.
Vinay Chajlani. Yeah, he was a very nice guy.
I still own a part of the company, and I hope
it was way ahead of its time. It was a great idea.
I think in some ways it still is. So a bunch of them, and I was actually in some ways a marketing counsel guy.
I thought AdAge had also invested in.
That's right. They came after me.
I remember Sudhir Sethi.
So we brought AdAge in, and so on and so forth. So for me, it was just another way of trying to get good marketing ideas out by saying, you know what, let me invest in companies and use smart marketing to grow them. So we did. So Geodesic, for example, I was the head of product, so design products, and later on head of merger and acquisition. Very strange position for a copywriter to be in and a filmmaker to be in, as you can imagine, right? So in the meanwhile, also, one of the other things I figured out while in Hong Kong was I used to direct commercials. One of my commercials, which I did for MTV, won like the best ad film of the decade, and won my best young director at Cannes and all that. So I was really.
Which film was this?
This was called the Ear Cleaner film. You just basically, do this entire thing where a guy on the streets of Bombay. So the really interesting thing about that entire series.
But, the problem with those kind of films, and someone was telling me this, it's a new trend in the international award shows. Maybe you started it in some form. Is called poverty porn. So it's like show very poor people, and that's sitting in these air-conditioned Cannes halls. You say, wow, that's real.
So maybe actually I don't know. I mean, there's this thing called tourism, which is poor tourism. But I'll describe the film. This is basically a middle-class man who is bedeviled. His head is shaking, and there's really tremendously loud Metallica kind of music playing or Slayer playing. He can't understand why his head is shaking. He goes to a guy, picks in his head, pulls out an MTV logo, and there's silence, birds chirp, and there's peace and a smile on his face. So I don't know if it was tourism. There's another one where a nice, party, Tambram party sits and does kolam outside a house, and you see that she's on the MTV logo and so on and so forth. So it wasn't exactly tourism. It was just basically saying it's Indian Rebellion. The brand that we had repositioned MTV was Indian Rebellion. So I'd done films.
So you set up the VC fund.
So then came and set up my angel fund. Angel is my own money, and so it was basically.
This is what?
99. So I set up this
fund.
No, Passion Fund. Set it up. I because I knew nothing about anything. I figured I should go to people who know something about something. So I had one nice IIT IIM boy. I said, you tell me how this thing works. I'll put the money. I'll put the time. And we both used to actually work out of just around the corner cafe. In fact, even now the official address of
I used to live very close to that.
Was so we'd get business plans there. We'd do our meetings there, and the companies that were coming to meet up would not have a problem because there were very pretty girls sitting on the other seat. So we had the most glamorous waiting room out there because it was just around the corner. Now it's called Eat Around the Corner. So did all right. Funded, did okay. Geodesic was a really big exit. Learned a lot about how to take companies public and all. I used to read finance books then. I remember one thing I learned when I used to handle Amazon. I remember sitting with Jeff Bezos one day for breakfast, and he was giving me some stuff. And I looked at him.
Did he understand finance?
So here's what I asked him. I told him, Jeff, you're a programmer. How the fuck do you know all this stuff? And he looked at me and said, Mahesh, I own a bookstore. And that time, what Jeff Bezos would do was whatever he didn't understand, he'd buy every book on the subject and read it.
I know some very big Indian industrialist does the same thing.
Right. So for me, I said, wow. So when I got into this investing thing, I bought every book on investing and read it.
So which is your favorite book on investing?
Yeah, there are so many. I mean, I've read, my favorite book on investing is a very boring one. It's called Annual Letters to the Shareholders by Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway.
Okay, then have you read Poor Charlie's Almanac?
I've read Poor Charlie's Almanac, but this is the actual collection
of Benjamin Graham.
Yeah, Benjamin Graham's investor. Yeah, so the education of a value investor and so on and so forth. So I'm big.
But their theory is very different from the way angels and VCs operate.
Not really, and we'll come down to that. So a lot of my investing is really fundamental investing. I believe it's value investing because I invest at low value and increase the value of the company. The only difference is that Buffett, he would not wait to increase the value of the company. He says, there a team, I'll wait for them to increase the value of the company. And I'd say, no, I'll see if I can. So basically started, did well. In 2004, one of the clients I was advising as kind of advisory committee was this NGO called CRY, Child Rights in You. They put me on some advisory
This
board.
was this guy's, right?
No, Ingrid Srinath used to be the...
Ingrid, but it was started by...
It was started by this other guy, I forget his name, but Ingrid was then the head
Ingrid
of
ran it,
revenues.
yes, I know.
And at one point, I think I said, let's go and raise some money for you globally on the internet. This was 2003. She, of course, looked at me and said, you're an idiot. So I just kept worked out and actually learned this thing called Google AdWords, which was coming in. I learned how to do it at home in the bedroom. And for fun, I started putting cry ads around the world. So one day, I think in December 2003, I got a summons from Ingrid, come here. So I went and said, have you been doing something on the internet? And I said, yes. Ingrid, why? She says, we have picked up some 65 lakhs in donations from 21 countries where we have no operations whatsoever. What have you done? So at which point I sheepishly took out the campaign and said, I've been running this campaign for 3-4 months, which generated all this revenue for an Indian company. So at which point she said, you will now do this for us formally and you will professionally charge for it. I never wanted to start an agency for a simple reason. I thought agencies were dead, agencies were dying. They believed in media commissions. I felt that was a stupid way to run a company by making the client charge more, pay more as opposed to making the client earn more. All that stuff. So even though I had in the US, successfully changed my own agency from a media model.
I have strong disagreement that that commission system actually rewards long-term relationship.
Actually, it rewards long-term relationships leading to the death of the client. I'm happy to even...
Not really.
It's okay. Really. We'll fight about this in this.
I don't agree with you at all.
No issues. Okay. So we'll talk about this and I'll tell you about at least the thesis I've been working on the last 5-7 years in terms of my investments and what role marketing and advertising plays in them. So anyway, we got on board and we got on board in a very strange way. We said, you know what, for every rupee that we raise for you, give us a part of the rupee that we raise for you and that's all. And I said, I don't want to be second guessed because I am raising the money for you and I am responsible for the money. You have no creative control. I have 100% creative control. She agreed. We had contractually written that the agency had ultimate creative control. The client had no power.
There's another agency which has been operating like this for more than 30 years.
Okay.
Where they put up the ad and they send a copy of the ad to the client.
So,
which is a famous campaign, Amul Hoardings.
Okay.
Amul Hoardings are approved by the client. Yeah, after Rahul puts them up.
Yeah, that's cool. So this was in some ways, when I was in Tricaya, Delhi, HCL used to do that work. Essentially, we would send the headline and then we would send the pull of the ad that had come in the paper and say, by the way, this was the ad that came and it's all right and so on and so forth, right? So there was a lot of trust. And here
so that's when you set up Pinstorm.
Yeah, so after that we set up Pinstorm because Ingrid said you have to do. So we set it up as a pay-for-performance firm. Basically saying, we pay for media, we pay for creative, you pay for results and that's it. Don't ask us about my media buy. Don't ask me about the creative. I will not tell you about what media I'm buying. Simply because I would, people would take a media plan done by somebody and give it to a cheaper agency to execute. I said, no, I won't tell you what media I'm buying and I won't tell you what ads I'm buying.
It's paper lead, paper sale.
Then it was paper sale. And then over a period of time, we did various other things, paper lead and so on and so forth. Did that for a long period of time and about 5-7 years ago had an epiphany and changed all that. So happy to tell you that.
So is Pinstorm still there or is
no, it's okay. We are in the Pinstorm office.
Oh, okay.
There's all of this is Pinstorm. All of the stuff you see around is absolutely Pinstorm.
Okay. So today, how much of your time goes in Pinstorm? How much of it goes in your
Sure. So about
VC
a day
stuff?
and a half a week is Pinstorm time. Day and a half a week is my startups.
So how many startups are you actively engaged in?
All right. So in terms of actual investments, I've invested in, I think, about 59 or 60 startups. 35 of them are through the fund that I own. About 21 of them are my individual investments. From the fund, there are about 5 or 10 active investments. From my personal investments, there are about 7 or 8 active investments.
Mahesh, that was fascinating story till now. Okay.
I haven't even come to the meet.
No. It was fascinating. Okay, so now we will take a break and then we'll sit down and talk again. And I want to ask you certain specific questions, certain areas, right? See you on the other side. Yeah.
Which goes into the text feed of the television. So you look at the change in sentiment of the stock price